They thought stripping me of my rank and burying me in a desk job would silence the truth about Operation Nightfall. 6 months later, I was standing in that same colonel's office, watching his face drain of color as I revealed the black badge that proved everything he'd tried to cover up. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped administrative office at Fort Richardson as I stared at the computer screen displaying my new assignment orders. Captain Maya Chen, formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment's most classified reconnaissance unit, now relegated to processing supply requisitions and maintaining equipment inventories for the base's motor pool division. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me that someone who had spent the last 4 years conducting deep cover intelligence operations behind enemy lines was now counting spare tire rotations and oil filter replacements. My hands trembled slightly as I read through the bureaucratic language that effectively ended my military career as I knew it. The transfer orders cited administrative reorganization and optimal utilization of personnel resources as justification for my reassignment, but the real reason sat in a classified file that would never see the light of day. 3 weeks earlier, I had submitted a detailed after-action report regarding irregularities observed during Operation Nightfall, a Black Ops mission that had gone sideways in ways that violated every protocol we'd sworn to uphold. The mission briefing had seemed straightforward when Colonel Marcus Webb laid it out in the secure conference room 6 months ago. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was coordinating terrorist activities from a compound in the mountains of Afghanistan. Our team of 8 specialists would infiltrate, gather evidence, and extract without engagement unless absolutely necessary for mission completion or personnel safety. What we discovered instead was a web of corruption that reached far higher in the chain of command than any of us had imagined possible. I had been handpicked for the Ghost Unit 3 years prior, after distinguishing myself during advanced reconnaissance training and demonstrating exceptional capabilities in covert surveillance and intelligence gathering. The selection process had been grueling, involving psychological evaluations, advanced combat scenarios, and security clearance investigations that examined every aspect of my background going back to elementary school. Only 12 operatives were chosen from over 300 candidates, and the unit's existence was known to fewer than 50 people within the entire Department of Defense. The Ghost Unit operated under deep cover protocols that required complete compartmentalization of our identities and activities. We maintained separate living quarters, used encrypted communication systems that bypassed standard military networks, and reported directly to a classified oversight committee that included representatives from multiple intelligence agencies. Our training included advanced infiltration techniques, foreign language immersion, cultural assimilation protocols, and psychological conditioning that prepared us for extended isolation in hostile environments. My specialty within the unit focused on electronic intelligence gathering and digital surveillance systems that could penetrate enemy communication networks without detection. The technical expertise required years of training in cybersecurity, signal intelligence, and advanced computer programming that went far beyond standard military education. I had earned advanced certifications in network penetration testing, digital forensics, and communication encryption that made me valuable not only for field operations but also for strategic intelligence analysis. The team assembled for Operation Nightfall included some of the most experienced operatives in the unit. Staff Sergeant Jake Rodriguez had served with distinction in multiple combat deployments and possessed expertise in explosive ordnance disposal and close-quarters combat. Technical Sergeant Lisa Park specialized in medical support and psychological operations that proved essential for long-duration missions in culturally complex environments. The team leader, Major David Thompson, had commanded successful operations across 3 different theaters and maintained security clearances that provided access to intelligence sources unavailable to conventional military units. Our insertion into the target area proceeded according to plan, with helicopter transport delivering us to a landing zone 12 kilometers from the suspected compound during pre-dawn darkness that provided optimal concealment for our approach march. The terrain was mountainous and difficult, requiring advanced climbing techniques and specialized equipment to navigate safely while maintaining operational security and avoiding detection by enemy patrols or surveillance systems. The compound surveillance phase revealed immediately that the intelligence briefing had been incomplete or deliberately misleading. Instead of a terrorist coordination center, we observed what appeared to be a legitimate medical facility serving local civilian populations. The buildings contained modern medical equipment, pharmaceutical supplies, and treatment areas that suggested humanitarian rather than military purposes. Local villagers brought their families for medical care during daylight hours, and the staff appeared to consist of doctors and nurses rather than military personnel or terrorist operatives. My electronic surveillance equipment detected communication signals that contradicted the mission briefing even further. The radio traffic consisted primarily of medical supply requests, patient transfer coordination, and administrative communications typical of healthcare facilities. There were no encrypted tactical communications, weapons coordination discussions, or strategic planning conversations that would indicate terrorist activities or military operations. Major Thompson ordered extended observation to verify our initial assessment and gather additional intelligence before making contact with higher command. We established a concealed observation post that provided comprehensive surveillance of the compound while maintaining communication security and avoiding detection by local security patrols. The additional surveillance confirmed that the facility was indeed providing legitimate medical services to civilian populations with no evidence of terrorist activities or military operations. The decision to contact Colonel Webb about our findings proved to be the beginning of the end for our careers and the integrity of the operation. When Major Thompson transmitted our initial assessment through encrypted channels, the response was immediate and unequivocal: proceed with the original mission parameters regardless of observed conditions. The orders specified that we were to treat the facility as a confirmed terrorist stronghold and gather intelligence accordingly, despite our field observations that contradicted the original briefing. Major Thompson requested clarification and additional intelligence to reconcile the discrepancy between mission briefing and field observations. Colonel Webb's response came back within 2 hours with explicit instructions to execute the mission as originally planned, accompanied by classified intelligence reports that allegedly confirmed terrorist activities at the facility. However, when I examined the digital signatures and metadata associated with these reports, irregularities suggested that the documents had been created or modified after our initial field assessment had been transmitted. The electronic intelligence gathering equipment I operated during the extended surveillance phase continued to contradict the official intelligence reports. Communication intercepts revealed that the medical facility was coordinating with international humanitarian organizations and local government health departments to provide medical services in underserved rural areas. The staff included doctors and nurses from multiple countries who had volunteered for humanitarian service, and the patient population consisted entirely of civilian families seeking medical care for their children and elderly relatives. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez expressed concerns about the mission parameters during a secure team meeting in our concealed observation post. His experience with explosive ordnance disposal had trained him to identify weapons storage areas and tactical defensive positions, neither of which were evident at the medical facility. The compound layout, security procedures, and personnel activities were consistent with civilian healthcare operations rather than military or terrorist installations. Technical Sergeant Park's medical expertise allowed her to observe and assess the healthcare activities through advanced optical surveillance equipment. Her analysis confirmed that the procedures being performed were legitimate medical treatments, including pediatric care, maternal health services, and treatment of infectious diseases common in the region. The pharmaceutical supplies and medical equipment were consistent with humanitarian aid distributions rather than military or terrorist supply chains. The team consensus was that we had been provided with inaccurate intelligence and that proceeding with the original mission parameters would constitute a serious violation of rules of engagement and potentially result in civilian casualties. Major Thompson made the decision to abort the mission and return to base for debriefing and clarification of intelligence discrepancies. This decision would ultimately cost all of us our careers and expose a corruption network that reached the highest levels of command. Our extraction proceeded without incident, but the debriefing session at Fort Richardson revealed the true scope of the problem we had uncovered. Colonel Webb's reaction to our mission abort and intelligence assessment was immediate and hostile. Instead of addressing the intelligence discrepancies or investigating the source of the inaccurate information, he questioned our competence and loyalty while insisting that we had failed to properly assess the target facility. The classified debriefing session included representatives from intelligence agencies who had not been present during the original mission briefing. These officials presented additional evidence that allegedly supported the original assessment of the medical facility as a terrorist stronghold, but the documentation they provided contained the same metadata irregularities I had observed in the field communications. Someone was manufacturing intelligence to support a predetermined conclusion rather than conducting objective analysis of actual conditions. My technical expertise in digital forensics allowed me to identify specific anomalies in the intelligence documents that indicated deliberate manipulation. Timestamps showed that critical portions of the reports had been created or modified after our field assessment had been transmitted, suggesting that evidence was being fabricated to contradict our observations. The electronic signatures associated with the documents were inconsistent with standard intelligence agency protocols, indicating potential security breaches or unauthorized document creation. When I attempted to present my technical analysis of the document irregularities during the debriefing session, Colonel Webb immediately classified the information as beyond my clearance level and ordered me to restrict my comments to operational observations rather than intelligence assessment. The reaction was so swift and defensive that it confirmed my suspicions about deliberate intelligence manipulation and cover-up activities. Major Thompson supported my technical analysis and requested a formal investigation into the intelligence discrepancies, citing potential security breaches and document fabrication that could compromise future operations and endanger personnel. His request was denied immediately, with Colonel Webb stating that the matter had been resolved through proper channels and that further discussion would constitute insubordination and potential violation of security protocols. The aftermath of the debriefing session began immediately with administrative actions that effectively dismantled our team and scattered us to assignments that would prevent further collaboration or investigation. Major Thompson received orders for immediate transfer to a training command position that would remove him from operational units and limit his access to classified intelligence. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and Technical Sergeant Park were reassigned to separate bases in different geographic regions under administrative reorganization orders that cited budget constraints and personnel optimization requirements. My own reassignment to the motor pool administrative position was presented as a temporary assignment pending completion of additional security clearance reviews and administrative processing. However, the reality was that my technical expertise in digital intelligence and forensic analysis made me a threat to whatever cover-up operation was being implemented to protect the corruption we had discovered during Operation Nightfall. The isolation was immediate and comprehensive. My access to classified computer systems was revoked pending the security review, preventing me from conducting further analysis of the intelligence documents or accessing communication records that could provide evidence of the cover-up. The secure communication devices that had connected me to the Ghost Unit network were confiscated and replaced with standard administrative equipment that provided no access to operational intelligence or unit activities. My living quarters were relocated from the secure housing complex that served Ghost Unit personnel to standard bachelor officer quarters that were subject to routine inspections and administrative oversight. The change eliminated my access to specialized technical equipment and secure communication facilities that had been essential for my intelligence analysis capabilities and operational effectiveness. The social isolation was equally devastating as word spread through informal networks that I was under investigation for unspecified security violations. Fellow officers who had previously sought my expertise and collaboration began avoiding contact, either from concern about their own careers or on direct orders from superior officers who wanted to contain any potential security breach or security investigation. The most difficult aspect of the isolation was the complete loss of purpose and professional identity that had defined my military career for the past 7 years. The transition from conducting classified intelligence operations that contributed directly to national security objectives to processing supply requisitions for vehicle maintenance represented not just a career setback but a fundamental disconnection from the mission and values that had motivated my service. The supply requisition work was mind-numbing in its simplicity and irrelevance compared to the complex analytical challenges and strategic thinking that had characterized my intelligence work. Counting spare parts and tracking maintenance schedules required no advanced training, technical expertise, or strategic thinking, leaving my capabilities completely underutilized while my knowledge of ongoing operations and security threats became increasingly outdated through lack of access and involvement. The administrative supervisor assigned to oversee my transition was Staff Sergeant Kevin Murphy, a career supply specialist whose primary concern was maintaining accurate inventory records and meeting administrative deadlines, rather than understanding the strategic implications of personnel assignments or operational effectiveness. His approach to supervision was bureaucratic and inflexible, focused on compliance with regulations rather than optimal utilization of available resources or personnel capabilities. Staff Sergeant Murphy made it clear from the beginning that my previous experience and training were irrelevant to my current assignment and that any attempts to suggest improvements or alternative approaches to administrative procedures would be considered insubordination. The message was unmistakable: comply with standard procedures without question or face additional disciplinary action that could further damage my career prospects and security clearance status. The daily routine in the motor pool administration office was monotonous and intellectually stultifying. Morning formation included brief announcements about supply delivery schedules and maintenance priorities, followed by individual assignment of specific administrative tasks that required no coordination or strategic planning. My responsibilities included updating computer databases with equipment serial numbers, processing purchase requests for replacement parts, and maintaining filing systems for maintenance records and inspection reports. The computer systems used for supply administration were outdated and inefficient, requiring manual data entry and redundant record keeping that could have been streamlined through basic automation and database integration. However, any suggestions for system improvement were dismissed immediately, with explanations that established procedures had been approved through proper channels and could not be modified without extensive bureaucratic review and approval processes. The contrast between my current administrative work and my previous intelligence operations was a constant reminder of how far I had fallen from the meaningful and challenging career that had defined my professional identity. The technical skills that had taken years to develop and had contributed directly to national security objectives were now completely irrelevant to my daily responsibilities. While my strategic thinking capabilities were not only unused but actively discouraged through administrative oversight and bureaucratic constraints, my security clearance review remained pending with no indication of when the process might be completed or what criteria were being used for evaluation. The uncertainty created constant anxiety about my future career prospects while preventing any planning for alternative assignments or professional development opportunities. The administrative limbo was clearly designed to maintain control over my activities while preventing access to information or networks that could support continued investigation of the Operation Nightfall cover-up. During lunch breaks and evening hours, I attempted to maintain physical fitness and mental sharpness through exercise routines and continuing education activities that could preserve my capabilities for eventual return to operational assignments. The base fitness facilities were adequate for basic physical conditioning, but the advanced training equipment and specialized programs that had maintained peak operational readiness were no longer accessible due to my administrative assignment and pending security review. Professional development opportunities were similarly restricted, with access to advanced training programs and certification courses requiring security clearances and command approval that were unavailable during my administrative assignment. The isolation extended beyond immediate work responsibilities to encompass all aspects of professional growth and career advancement, creating a comprehensive barrier to recovery from my current circumstances. The base library provided some intellectual stimulation through access to technical publications and professional journals that allowed me to maintain awareness of developments in cybersecurity, intelligence analysis, and military technology. However, the reading material was limited to unclassified sources that provided only general information rather than the detailed technical knowledge and strategic analysis that had been essential for my intelligence work. Evening hours in my bachelor officer quarters were the most difficult part of each day, providing time for reflection on how dramatically my circumstances had changed and uncertainty about future possibilities for career recovery.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The small apartment was functional but impersonal, lacking the specialized equipment and secure communication capabilities that had been integral to my professional identity and daily activities. The isolation from former teammates and colleagues was particularly painful, as I wondered about their experiences with reassignment and whether they were facing similar administrative obstacles or had found ways to continue their careers despite the Operation Nightfall aftermath. The compartmentalized nature of ghost unit operations meant that I had no way to contact them directly or learn about their situations without violating security protocols that could result in additional disciplinary action. Sleep was often difficult due to anxiety about the security review process and uncertainty about future career prospects. The transition from high-stress operational environments to monotonous administrative work created psychological adjustment challenges that were compounded by the isolation from professional networks and meaningful work responsibilities. The combination of intellectual understimulation and career uncertainty created a persistent state of frustration and concern about long-term prospects. Physical exercise became increasingly important as an outlet for stress and a way to maintain the conditioning and discipline that had been central to my military identity. The base running trails provided opportunities for solitude and reflection while maintaining cardiovascular fitness, and the weight training facilities allowed me to preserve the physical capabilities that might be essential for eventual return to operational assignments. The running routine also provided time to think strategically about my situation and consider options for addressing the injustice that had resulted from my honest reporting of intelligence irregularities during Operation Nightfall. The cover-up that had destroyed my career was likely affecting other personnel in operations, creating ongoing security risks and corruption that extended far beyond my personal circumstances. The realization that my silence was enabling continued corruption and potentially endangering future operations gradually overcame my concern about further career damage from challenging the official narrative. The evidence I had gathered regarding intelligence document manipulation represented serious security violations that warranted investigation regardless of personal consequences. The decision to pursue the matter further would require careful planning and strategic thinking about how to expose the corruption without providing additional opportunities for retaliation or cover-up activities. My technical expertise in digital forensics remained relevant even without access to classified systems, and the evidence I had observed could potentially be reconstructed through careful analysis and documentation. The challenge was finding appropriate channels for reporting security violations when the normal chain of command was compromised by the same corruption that had caused the problem. Alternative reporting mechanisms existed within the military justice system and inspector general offices, but accessing them would require careful preparation and strategic thinking about timing and presentation of evidence. The decision to challenge the cover-up represented a significant risk to my remaining career prospects and personal safety, but the alternative was accepting that corruption and intelligence manipulation would continue unchallenged while potentially endangering other personnel and compromising national security objectives. The choice between personal security and professional responsibility was clear, even if the path forward was uncertain and dangerous. The planning process began during evening hours in my quarters, where I could work without surveillance or interference from administrative supervisors. Using unclassified research methods and publicly available information, I began documenting the timeline of events surrounding Operation Nightfall and identifying potential sources of evidence that could support a formal complaint through appropriate channels. The documentation process required careful attention to security protocols and classification requirements to ensure that I did not violate any legitimate security restrictions while gathering evidence of misconduct and cover-up activities. The balance between exposing corruption and protecting legitimate classified information required detailed knowledge of security regulations and legal requirements that I had acquired through years of intelligence work. The investigation would require months of careful preparation and strategic planning, but the foundation was being established through detailed documentation and analysis of available evidence. The motor pool assignment provided perfect cover for the preliminary research activities while creating the appearance of complete compliance with administrative requirements and disciplinary measures. The irony was not lost on me that the administrative assignment intended to silence my concerns about Operation Nightfall was actually providing the time and motivation necessary to develop a comprehensive case against the corruption I had discovered. The cover-up that was meant to protect Colonel Webb and his associates was creating the conditions for a more thorough investigation that could expose the full scope of their activities and provide accountability for the injustices that had been committed. The first sign that my investigation was being monitored came 3 weeks into my motor pool assignment when I discovered that my personal laptop had been accessed during my absence from quarters. The subtle repositioning of files and browser history modifications were barely detectable to most users, but my training in digital security made the intrusion obvious. Someone with administrative access to base computer networks was conducting surveillance of my personal activities and communication patterns. The realization that my privacy had been violated confirmed that Colonel Webb's cover-up extended beyond simple administrative punishment to active monitoring and potential interference with any attempts to expose the corruption surrounding Operation Nightfall. The surveillance suggested that my superiors considered me an ongoing threat despite my isolation from classified systems and operational activities. My response to the surveillance discovery required careful strategic thinking about how to continue gathering evidence while avoiding detection of my investigation activities. The challenge was maintaining the appearance of complete compliance with administrative duties while secretly documenting the corruption and preparing a case for submission through appropriate whistleblower channels. The solution involved compartmentalizing my investigation activities across multiple platforms and locations to prevent comprehensive surveillance of my research and documentation efforts. I began using public library computers during off-duty hours to conduct research using only publicly available sources and unclassified information that could not violate security protocols or provide grounds for additional disciplinary action. The public library in the nearby town of Fairbanks provided computer access that was not subject to military network monitoring, allowing me to research legal precedents for whistleblower cases and inspector general complaint procedures without alerting base security personnel to my activities. The research revealed multiple channels for reporting security violations and misconduct that bypassed normal chain of command structures. During my research at the public library, I discovered that several other military personnel had filed complaints about intelligence manipulation and cover-up activities involving Colonel Webb's command structure over the past 2 years. The patterns described in these complaints were remarkably similar to what I had observed during Operation Nightfall, suggesting that the corruption was systematic rather than isolated to a single incident. The most significant discovery was a complaint filed by former Major Patricia Williams, who had been transferred out of the Intelligence Division 6 months before my own reassignment. Her documented concerns about fabricated intelligence reports and retaliation against personnel who questioned operational irregularities matched my own experience so precisely that it could not be coincidental. Major Williams had been assigned to oversee intelligence analysis for operations in the same geographical region where Operation Nightfall had occurred. Her complaint detailed instances where field assessments were contradicted by intelligence reports that appeared to have been created or modified after operational teams had submitted contrary evidence. The similarities to my own experience suggested that intelligence manipulation had been ongoing for extended periods. The complaint filed by Major Williams had been dismissed by the Inspector General's office with a determination that insufficient evidence existed to substantiate claims of misconduct or cover-up activities. However, my technical expertise in digital forensics suggested that the evidence she had provided might have been more substantial than the official determination indicated, and that the dismissal itself might have been influenced by the same corruption she was attempting to expose. I began developing a strategy for contacting Major Williams to compare our experiences and potentially coordinate our efforts to expose the systematic corruption within Colonel Webb's command structure. The challenge was making contact without alerting the surveillance systems that were monitoring my activities and communications. The motor pool assignment provided unexpected opportunities for information gathering through informal conversations with personnel who had worked with various units and commands throughout the base. Mechanics and supply specialists often possess detailed knowledge about equipment assignments, personnel transfers, and operational activities that were not reflected in official documentation. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, not the explosive ordnance specialist from my Ghost Unit team but a different Rodriguez who supervised vehicle maintenance operations, proved to be particularly knowledgeable about personnel movements and administrative irregularities that had occurred over the past year. His observations about unusual transfer patterns and security investigations provided valuable context for understanding the scope of Colonel Webb's cover-up activities. According to Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's informal observations, several highly qualified personnel had been transferred out of intelligence and operational units under administrative reorganization orders that seemed inconsistent with normal personnel management practices. The transferred personnel had included some of the most experienced and competent specialists in their respective fields, suggesting that competence itself had become a liability within Colonel Webb's command structure. The conversation with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez occurred during routine vehicle inspection procedures that provided natural cover for extended discussion without attracting attention from supervisory personnel. His willingness to share observations about administrative irregularities suggested that concerns about corruption and mismanagement were widespread among non-commissioned officers who observed day-to-day operations from perspectives that senior officers often overlooked. The information provided by Staff Sergeant Rodriguez included specific details about equipment transfers and supply chain irregularities that could potentially provide documentary evidence of misconduct if properly investigated. His observations about unauthorized equipment modifications and non-standard procurement procedures suggested financial improprieties that extended beyond intelligence manipulation to include potential fraud and misappropriation of military resources. The patterns described by Staff Sergeant Rodriguez indicated that Colonel Webb's corruption network included personnel from multiple departments and functional areas throughout the base. Supply chain manipulation, personnel transfer irregularities, and intelligence fabrication represented a comprehensive system of misconduct that affected virtually every aspect of military operations under his command authority. My investigation expanded to include systematic documentation of these broader corruption patterns while maintaining focus on the specific intelligence manipulation that had destroyed my career and potentially endangered other personnel. The comprehensive approach would provide stronger evidence for Inspector General complaints while demonstrating that Operation Nightfall represented part of a larger pattern of misconduct rather than an isolated incident. The documentation process required careful attention to security protocols and legal requirements to ensure that I did not violate legitimate classification restrictions while gathering evidence of criminal activity. The balance between whistleblower protections and security obligations required detailed knowledge of military law and Inspector General procedures that I researched extensively during off-duty hours. The Base Legal Assistance Office provided general guidance about whistleblower protections and Inspector General complaint procedures during a consultation that I scheduled under the pretense of seeking advice about administrative appeals and career development opportunities. The legal officer, Captain Jennifer Torres, provided detailed information about procedural requirements and documentary evidence standards that would be essential for successful complaint resolution. Captain Torres explained that Inspector General complaints required substantial documentary evidence and corroborating testimony from multiple sources to overcome presumptions in favor of command authority and administrative discretion. The standards for proving misconduct were deliberately high to prevent frivolous complaints, but they also created barriers for exposing sophisticated cover-up operations that had been designed specifically to eliminate documentary evidence and intimidate potential witnesses. The conversation with Captain Torres provided crucial insight into the strategic approach required for exposing Colonel Webb's corruption network. Her emphasis on documentary evidence and corroborating testimony confirmed that my technical analysis of intelligence document manipulation would be essential but insufficient without additional evidence from other sources and witnesses. The challenge of gathering corroborating testimony was complicated by the systematic transfer and reassignment of personnel who had observed misconduct or possessed relevant knowledge. Major Thompson, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, and Technical Sergeant Park from my Ghost Unit team were no longer accessible for direct communication due to their reassignments to different bases and geographic regions. However, the personnel transfer records were maintained in administrative databases that could potentially provide contact information and assignment details for former colleagues who might be willing to provide testimony about their own experiences with corruption and retaliation. The challenge was accessing this information without violating security protocols or alerting supervisory personnel to my investigation activities. The solution involved leveraging my administrative assignment in the motor pool to gain legitimate access to personnel databases for routine supply coordination and equipment assignment purposes. The database queries required for my administrative duties provided cover for broader research activities that could identify contact information and current assignments for personnel who might possess relevant knowledge about Colonel Webb's misconduct. The database research revealed that Major Thompson had been assigned to a training command position at Fort Benning while Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and Technical Sergeant Park had been transferred to separate bases in different geographic regions as I had suspected. However, the research also identified several other former intelligence personnel who had been transferred under similar circumstances and might have experienced comparable retaliation for reporting misconduct or questioning operational irregularities. Former Captain Lisa Chang had been transferred from intelligence analysis to a logistics position after filing complaints about intelligence document irregularities that were remarkably similar to those I had observed during Operation Nightfall. Her complaint had been dismissed with administrative findings that cited insufficient evidence and procedural deficiencies, but the documented concerns suggested that she had observed the same intelligence manipulation techniques that had been used to justify the Operation Nightfall mission parameters. The pattern of personnel transfers and complaint dismissals suggested that Colonel Webb's cover-up network included personnel within the Inspector General's office who were either complicit in the corruption or had been deceived by sophisticated evidence manipulation that made legitimate complaints appear unfounded. The possibility that official complaint channels had been compromised required consideration of alternative approaches for exposing the misconduct. My research identified congressional oversight committees and Department of Defense Inspector General offices that operated independently of local command structures and might provide more objective evaluation of evidence regarding systematic corruption and cover-up activities. These alternative channels offered potential for bypassing compromised local complaint processes while maintaining legal protections for whistleblower activities. The preparation of complaints for congressional oversight required even higher standards of documentary evidence and legal precision than Inspector General procedures. The complexity of the requirements necessitated professional legal assistance that extended beyond the general guidance available through base legal assistance offices. I began researching civilian attorneys who specialized in military whistleblower cases and possessed security clearances that would allow them to review classified evidence while maintaining appropriate confidentiality and legal protection. The research was conducted during off-duty hours using public library computers to avoid detection by base network monitoring systems. The attorney research revealed that military whistleblower cases were complex and expensive legal proceedings that often required years of litigation and substantial financial resources. However, several attorneys had successfully represented military personnel in cases involving intelligence manipulation and retaliation, demonstrating that legal remedies were available for personnel who possessed sufficient evidence and determination to pursue justice through civilian courts. The financial requirements for professional legal representation created additional challenges given my reduced income and uncertain career prospects. However, some attorneys offered contingent fee arrangements for cases involving substantial misconduct that could result in significant settlements or monetary awards through False Claims Act provisions or other legal remedies. The False Claims Act research revealed that intelligence fraud and military procurement irregularities could result in substantial civil penalties and monetary recovery for the government, with whistleblower awards potentially reaching millions of dollars in cases involving systematic corruption and fraud. The financial incentives created strong motivation for attorneys to accept cases with solid evidence and clear legal merit. My investigation had identified sufficient evidence to justify preliminary consultation with specialized military whistleblower attorneys who could evaluate the strength of potential cases and provide guidance about strategic approaches for exposing Colonel Webb's corruption network. The preliminary consultation would require careful preparation of evidence summaries and legal documentation that protected classified information while providing sufficient detail to demonstrate the scope and severity of the misconduct. The evidence preparation process required weeks of careful documentation and analysis to present the complex corruption patterns in formats that would be accessible to civilian attorneys who lacked detailed knowledge of military operations and intelligence procedures. The challenge was explaining technical aspects of intelligence manipulation and operational security without violating classification restrictions or compromising ongoing security requirements. The preliminary evidence package included detailed analysis of document metadata, irregularities, timeline discrepancies in intelligence reporting, and patterns of personnel retaliation that demonstrated systematic misconduct rather than isolated incidents or administrative errors. The technical analysis was supplemented with witness statements and circumstantial evidence that supported claims of deliberate cover-up activities and obstruction of legitimate complaint processes. The package also included comprehensive documentation of financial irregularities and procurement fraud that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had observed, providing additional grounds for False Claims Act litigation that could result in substantial monetary recovery and criminal penalties for involved personnel. The combination of intelligence fraud and financial misconduct created multiple legal avenues for pursuing accountability and justice. The completion of the preliminary evidence package represented months of careful investigation and documentation work that had been conducted during off-duty hours while maintaining full compliance with administrative duties and security requirements. The comprehensive nature of the evidence demonstrated systematic corruption that extended far beyond the Operation Nightfall incident that had initially motivated my investigation. The decision to proceed with legal action represented a significant escalation in my confrontation with Colonel Webb's corruption network. But the alternative was accepting that the misconduct would continue unchallenged while potentially endangering other personnel and compromising national security objectives. The evidence was sufficiently compelling to justify the risks associated with formal legal challenge to high-ranking military officers.
The attorney consultation was scheduled for a weekend meeting in Anchorage, providing geographic separation from the base environment and reducing the likelihood of surveillance or interference from military personnel. The civilian location also provided additional legal protections and confidentiality safeguards that would be essential for discussing classified information and developing litigation strategies. The preparation for the attorney consultation included final review and organization of all evidence materials, while ensuring that classification restrictions were respected and appropriate legal protections were maintained throughout the documentation process. The meeting would determine whether sufficient evidence existed to justify formal legal action and identify additional investigation requirements that might strengthen potential cases. The drive to Anchorage provided time for final reflection on the decision to challenge Colonel Webb's corruption network through civilian legal channels. The risks to my remaining career prospects and personal safety were substantial, but the alternative was accepting that corruption and misconduct would continue unchallenged while potentially endangering other military personnel and compromising national security objectives. The civilian attorney's office was located in a professional building that provided appropriate confidentiality and security for discussing sensitive military matters. The environment was businesslike and reassuring, suggesting competence and experience with complex federal litigation that would be essential for successfully challenging sophisticated corruption networks within the military command structure. Attorney Michael Harrison specialized in military whistleblower cases and possessed both security clearance and extensive experience with False Claims Act litigation involving defense contractors and military personnel. His background included successful representation of multiple clients in cases involving intelligence fraud and retaliation, demonstrating proven capability for handling complex military corruption cases. The initial consultation revealed that my evidence package contained substantial grounds for both Inspector General complaints and False Claims Act litigation that could result in significant monetary recovery and criminal penalties for Colonel Webb and his associates. The technical analysis of intelligence document manipulation was particularly compelling evidence of systematic fraud that extended beyond administrative misconduct to potential criminal violations of federal law. Attorney Harrison's assessment confirmed that the evidence was sufficiently strong to justify formal legal action, but he recommended additional investigation to identify all participants in the corruption network and gather additional documentary evidence that could support comprehensive litigation against all responsible parties. The expanded investigation would require several months of additional work but could result in much larger monetary recovery and more complete accountability for the misconduct. The legal strategy discussion revealed multiple avenues for pursuing justice, including Inspector General complaints, congressional oversight referrals, False Claims Act litigation, and potential criminal referrals to federal prosecutors. The comprehensive approach would maximize pressure on the corruption network while providing multiple opportunities for successful resolution and accountability. The retainer agreement included provisions for contingent fee representation that would allow me to pursue legal action without substantial upfront costs while providing Attorney Harrison with appropriate financial incentives for achieving successful outcomes. The arrangement eliminated financial barriers to justice while aligning attorney and client interests in achieving comprehensive accountability for the corruption network. The decision to proceed with formal legal action represented a point of no return in my confrontation with Colonel Webb's corruption network. The comprehensive investigation and litigation strategy would likely require months or years to complete, but the evidence was sufficiently compelling to justify the commitment and risks associated with challenging high-ranking military officers through civilian legal channels. The return drive to Fort Richardson was accompanied by both anxiety and determination as I contemplated the challenges ahead while maintaining confidence that justice would ultimately prevail over corruption and cover-up activities. The legal action represented not only vindication for my own treatment but also protection for other military personnel who might otherwise fall victim to similar misconduct and retaliation. The motor pool assignment that had been intended to silence my concerns about Operation Nightfall had actually provided the time and motivation necessary to develop a comprehensive case against Colonel Webb's corruption network. The administrative punishment that was meant to end my military career was becoming the foundation for exposing systematic misconduct that threatened the integrity of military operations and national security objectives. The retaliation began subtly 2 weeks after my meeting with Attorney Harrison, manifesting first through deliberate scheduling conflicts that prevented me from completing routine administrative tasks within prescribed time frames. Staff Sergeant Murphy began assigning overlapping deadlines for supply reports and inventory audits that required simultaneous attention to multiple urgent priorities, creating impossible situations that guaranteed procedural violations regardless of my work quality or dedication. The manufactured crises were designed to create documentation of performance deficiencies that could justify additional disciplinary action or administrative discharge proceedings. Each missed deadline or incomplete report provided ammunition for personnel evaluations that would further damage my career prospects while maintaining the appearance of legitimate performance management rather than vindictive retaliation for my legal activities. My response required careful strategic thinking about how to document the deliberate sabotage while maintaining professional standards and avoiding behaviors that could be interpreted as insubordination or failure to follow orders. The challenge was protecting myself from administrative manipulation while gathering evidence of retaliation that could support my legal case against Colonel Webb's corruption network. I began maintaining detailed logs of all work assignments, deadlines, and resource availability that would demonstrate the impossible nature of the conflicting requirements and the deliberate intent to create performance failures. The documentation process required meticulous attention to timing and circumstantial evidence that would prove systematic interference rather than normal administrative challenges or my own performance limitations. The workload manipulation was accompanied by deliberate resource restrictions that made successful task completion even more difficult. Essential supplies were delayed or delivered in insufficient quantities, computer access was restricted through frequent system maintenance and security updates, and clerical support was reassigned to other priorities without advance notice or alternative arrangements. The most frustrating aspect of the administrative sabotage was its sophistication and plausible deniability. Each individual restriction or delay could be explained through legitimate administrative reasons, but the cumulative effect created comprehensive obstacles that prevented successful performance while maintaining the appearance of normal operational challenges rather than deliberate interference. Staff Sergeant Murphy's behavior during this period revealed clear coordination with higher authority figures who were directing the retaliation campaign. His sudden change from routine supervision to aggressive micromanagement and unreasonable deadline enforcement suggested that he was receiving specific instructions about how to create performance documentation that could support disciplinary action against me. The deliberate nature of the retaliation became obvious during a particularly egregious incident involving emergency inventory requirements that were imposed with 4 hours' notice for completion of tasks that typically required 2 full days of preparation and analysis. The timeline was physically impossible even with unlimited resources and perfect conditions, yet failure to meet the deadline resulted in formal counseling documentation that cited poor time management and inadequate attention to detail. The formal counseling session with Staff Sergeant Murphy was conducted in the presence of his immediate supervisor, Master Sergeant Patricia Cole, who had not previously been involved in my administrative oversight but apparently had been briefed about specific performance concerns that needed documentation for personnel evaluation purposes. The coordinated nature of the session confirmed that the retaliation was being directed from higher levels within the command structure. Master Sergeant Cole's questions during the counseling session focused specifically on my commitment to following orders and chain of command procedures rather than technical aspects of the administrative work that had allegedly been performed inadequately. The emphasis on loyalty and obedience rather than work quality suggested that my legal activities had been discovered and that the retaliation was intended to pressure me into abandoning my complaints against Colonel Webb. The formal counseling documentation included language that questioned my reliability and trustworthiness in addition to criticizing work performance, creating personnel records that could be used to revoke security clearances or support administrative discharge proceedings. The character assassination was particularly damaging because it attacked my professional reputation and integrity rather than simply documenting isolated performance issues. My attempts to present evidence of the impossible deadlines and resource restrictions were dismissed with explanations that all military personnel were expected to overcome challenges through initiative and dedication rather than making excuses for performance failures. The dismissal of legitimate explanations confirmed that the counseling session was intended to create documentation rather than address actual performance concerns or provide constructive feedback. The escalating retaliation required immediate consultation with Attorney Harrison to develop protective strategies and gather evidence that could demonstrate the retaliatory nature of the administrative actions. The legal consultation was scheduled as an emergency meeting to address the urgent threat to my career and personal safety that the formal counseling documentation represented. Attorney Harrison's analysis of the counseling documentation confirmed that the language and timing were consistent with retaliation patterns he had observed in other military whistleblower cases. The emphasis on loyalty and obedience combined with character attacks suggested that my legal activities had been discovered and that the command structure was implementing systematic pressure designed to force me to withdraw my complaints. The legal strategy discussion revealed that the retaliation itself provided additional evidence of the corruption and cover-up activities I was challenging, but it also created immediate risks that required protective measures to prevent further career damage or potential criminal charges based on manufactured evidence. The balance between gathering evidence and protecting myself required careful coordination of legal and administrative responses. Attorney Harrison recommended filing emergency complaints with the Inspector General's office and congressional oversight committees to create official documentation of the retaliation while establishing legal protections against further administrative manipulation. The emergency filings would also serve notice to Colonel Webb's network that their activities were being monitored and documented for legal purposes. The emergency complaint preparation required comprehensive documentation of the timeline relationship between my legal consultation and the subsequent retaliation, including detailed evidence of the impossible work requirements and coordinated administrative sabotage. The documentation process revealed the sophisticated nature of the retaliation campaign while providing compelling evidence of consciousness of guilt by the corruption network. The filing of emergency complaints created immediate escalation in my confrontation with Colonel Webb's corruption network, but the alternative was accepting continued retaliation that could result in administrative discharge or criminal charges based on manufactured evidence. The legal protections were essential for preserving my ability to continue pursuing justice while protecting against further administrative manipulation. The response to the emergency complaints was swift and revealing. Within 48 hours of the filings, the impossible deadline assignments stopped abruptly and Staff Sergeant Murphy's behavior returned to routine supervision without explanation or acknowledgement of the previous harassment campaign. The immediate change confirmed that senior command personnel had been directing the retaliation and were now attempting to avoid additional evidence of their misconduct. However, the cessation of obvious retaliation was replaced by more subtle forms of isolation and professional marginalization that were more difficult to document but equally damaging to my career prospects and personal well-being. Informal social networks that had previously included me in conversations and activities began excluding me from participation, creating comprehensive professional isolation that affected every aspect of my work environment. The social isolation extended beyond immediate supervisors to include peers and subordinates who had previously maintained friendly professional relationships. The comprehensive nature of the exclusion suggested that official or unofficial guidance had been disseminated throughout the command structure regarding my status and the need to limit contact and collaboration with me. The isolation was particularly painful because it affected personnel who had no knowledge of the legal dispute but were following guidance from superior officers who wanted to prevent any potential contamination from association with someone who was challenging command authority through civilian legal channels. The innocent compliance with retaliatory guidance created comprehensive professional ostracism without individual malicious intent. My daily work environment became increasingly uncomfortable as conversations stopped when I entered areas, invitations to informal gatherings were withdrawn, and collaborative work relationships were replaced by minimal professional communication limited to essential administrative requirements. The psychological impact of the isolation was severe and clearly intended to pressure me into abandoning my legal challenges. The emotional toll of professional isolation was compounded by uncertainty about the ultimate success of my legal case and concerns about permanent damage to my career prospects even if the litigation eventually succeeded. The retaliation had already created personnel documentation that could affect future assignments and advancement opportunities regardless of whether the underlying corruption charges were proven. Physical fitness activities provided essential stress relief and mental health maintenance during this period of professional isolation and legal uncertainty. The base running trails offered solitude for reflection and strategic planning while maintaining the physical conditioning and discipline that remained central to my military identity despite the administrative circumstances. The running routine also provided opportunities to observe other personnel and identify individuals who might be sympathetic to my situation or possess relevant information about Colonel Webb's corruption network. Casual conversations during fitness activities sometimes revealed concerns about command leadership and administrative irregularities that supported my broader understanding of the systematic misconduct affecting multiple personnel and operations. During one particularly significant conversation following a morning run, Senior Airman Jennifer Walsh mentioned unusual patterns in classified document handling that she had observed while working in the intelligence section before being transferred to a different assignment under administrative reorganization orders. Her observations about document security violations and access irregularities provided additional evidence of the intelligence manipulation that had affected Operation Nightfall. Senior Airman Walsh's willingness to discuss her observations suggested that concerns about corruption and misconduct were widespread among junior personnel who lacked the authority or resources to challenge superior officers but recognized the serious nature of the security violations they had witnessed. Her information provided potential corroborating testimony for my legal case while identifying another victim of the administrative retaliation that was being used to silence personnel who possessed inconvenient knowledge. The conversation with Senior Airman Walsh revealed that she had been transferred from intelligence work to a supply position similar to my own reassignment despite exceptional performance evaluations and advanced training that made her valuable for continued intelligence responsibilities. The pattern of transferring competent personnel away from sensitive positions suggested systematic efforts to remove potential witnesses and limit access to evidence of ongoing misconduct. Senior Airman Walsh agreed to provide testimony about her observations through proper legal channels after I explained the protections available for witnesses in federal litigation and the importance of her information for exposing corruption that affected national security and personnel safety. Her cooperation provided crucial corroborating evidence while demonstrating that the corruption network's activities were known to multiple personnel who had been intimidated into silence through retaliation threats. The identification of additional witnesses and evidence sources required careful strategic thinking about how to approach other potential victims and observers without alerting Colonel Webb's network to my expanding investigation. The challenge was building a comprehensive case while maintaining operational security and protecting potential witnesses from retaliation similar to what I had experienced. Attorney Harrison provided guidance about witness protection procedures and legal requirements for gathering testimony while maintaining confidentiality and security for personnel who risk career damage through cooperation with legal challenges to command authority. The legal framework provided some protection, but the practical risks remained substantial for military personnel who challenged senior officers through civilian court systems. The witness development process revealed that Colonel Webb's corruption network had affected far more personnel than I had initially realized. With systematic patterns of intelligence manipulation, financial fraud, and administrative retaliation extending across multiple units and operational areas, The comprehensive scope of the misconduct suggested that accountability efforts could result in significant organizational changes and criminal prosecutions if sufficient evidence could be gathered and presented effectively. The expanding investigation required increased security precautions to protect evidence and witness communications from surveillance and interference by personnel who had demonstrated willingness to engage in document manipulation and administrative sabotage. The technical skills I had developed during Ghost Unit training proved valuable for implementing communication security and evidence protection measures using civilian resources and legal protections. The coordination with Attorney Harrison intensified as the evidence base expanded. Additional legal strategies became viable through the identification of multiple victims and witnesses who could provide testimony about different aspects of the corruption network's activities. The comprehensive nature of the evidence was creating opportunities for more extensive accountability and justice than I had initially anticipated when the investigation began. The legal case development was progressing toward formal litigation that could expose the entire corruption network while providing significant monetary recovery through False Claims Act provisions and other federal remedies. The potential financial awards created strong motivation for continued investigation despite the personal costs and professional risks associated with challenging powerful military officers through civilian legal systems. However, the expanding scope of the investigation was also creating increased risks as Colonel Webb's network became aware of the threat to their operations and began implementing more sophisticated countermeasures designed to discredit my allegations and intimidate potential witnesses. The escalation required careful strategic thinking about timing and protective measures that could preserve evidence while maintaining witness safety and cooperation. The most significant development during this period was the discovery that my investigation had attracted attention from federal agencies beyond the military justice system, including FBI personnel who were conducting parallel investigations into defense contracting fraud and intelligence security violations. The federal interest provided additional resources and legal protections while validating the serious nature of the corruption I had uncovered. The coordination with federal investigators required extensive security clearance review and legal coordination to ensure that classified information was handled appropriately while supporting comprehensive investigation of the corruption network's activities. The federal involvement also provided protection against further retaliation and administrative manipulation by creating oversight that extended beyond military command structures. The federal investigation revealed that Colonel Webb's corruption network had connections to defense contractors and civilian personnel who were involved in intelligence fraud and procurement irregularities that extended far beyond military operations to include civilian national security activities. The expanded scope created opportunities for more comprehensive accountability while increasing the complexity and duration of the legal proceedings. The realization that my individual case had uncovered systematic corruption affecting national security created both satisfaction about the importance of my efforts and concern about the personal risks associated with challenging such an extensive criminal network.
The decision to continue required careful evaluation of protective measures and legal safeguards that could ensure my safety while supporting complete exposure of the misconduct. The breakthrough came through an unexpected source during a routine equipment inspection when I discovered a USB drive hidden inside a decommissioned radio unit that was scheduled for disposal. The device contained encrypted files that appeared to be intelligence documents and financial records that could provide direct evidence of the corruption network's activities spanning several years of fraudulent operations. The discovery occurred while I was conducting inventory verification for equipment that Staff Sergeant Murphy had assigned for disposal processing. The radio unit had been reported as irreparable due to internal component failure, but my technical training revealed that the damage was superficial and the device had been deliberately disabled to conceal the hidden storage device within its internal structure. The encryption on the USB files was sophisticated but not beyond my capabilities given the advanced cybersecurity training I had received during Ghost Unit preparation. The decryption process required several days of careful analysis using personal equipment during off-duty hours to avoid detection by base network monitoring systems that could alert Colonel Webb's associates to my discovery. The decrypted files revealed comprehensive documentation of intelligence fraud, procurement kickbacks, and operational fund misappropriation that involved not only Colonel Webb but also several other senior officers and civilian contractors who had been systematically defrauding the government for substantial financial gain.
The evidence included detailed financial records, communication logs, and operational plans that demonstrated premeditated criminal activity rather than administrative oversight or judgment errors. The most damaging evidence included recorded conversations between Colonel Webb and defense contractor representatives discussing specific amounts of fraudulent billing and procedures for creating false intelligence reports that would justify unnecessary equipment purchases and operational expenditures. The recordings provided direct proof of criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond the intelligence manipulation I had originally discovered during Operation Nightfall. The financial records documented millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions involving defense contracts for equipment that was never delivered, services that were never provided, and operational supplies that were diverted to personal use or sold on secondary markets for private profit. The systematic nature of the fraud indicated that the corruption network had been operating for years while avoiding detection through sophisticated document manipulation and security protocol violations. The evidence also revealed that several legitimate operational missions had been compromised or canceled to conceal the fraud activities, potentially endangering personnel and compromising national security objectives for financial gain. The operational impact of the corruption extended far beyond administrative misconduct to include direct threats to military effectiveness and personnel safety in active operational theaters. The source of the hidden evidence remained unclear, but the sophistication of the encryption and the comprehensive nature of the documentation suggested that someone within the corruption network had been gathering evidence for insurance purposes or had developed concerns about the criminal activities and was preparing to expose the misconduct through anonymous disclosure. The timing of my discovery suggested that the evidence had been concealed recently, possibly in response to my own investigation activities that had created pressure within the corruption network and motivated someone to preserve evidence that could provide protection or leverage in potential legal proceedings. The coincidental nature of the discovery during routine disposal processing seemed too convenient to be entirely accidental. Attorney Harrison's analysis of the new evidence confirmed that the documentation provided overwhelming proof of federal crimes that would support comprehensive prosecution of the entire corruption network while ensuring substantial monetary recovery through False Claims Act litigation. The evidence quality exceeded anything he had encountered in previous military fraud cases and virtually guaranteed successful prosecution and significant financial awards. The federal investigators who had been conducting parallel investigations were immediately notified about the discovery and requested emergency meetings to coordinate evidence analysis and witness protection procedures. The comprehensive nature of the new evidence created opportunities for expanded criminal prosecution while increasing the urgency of protective measures for personnel who were cooperating with the investigation. The FBI analysis of the evidence revealed that the corruption network had connections to organized crime groups and foreign intelligence services that were exploiting the security vulnerabilities created by the fraudulent activities. The national security implications transformed the case from military corruption to potential espionage and treason charges that carried severe criminal penalties and required extensive counterintelligence investigation. The discovery that foreign intelligence services had been exploiting Colonel Webb's corruption network created immediate concerns about operational security and the potential compromise of classified information and personnel identities. The counterintelligence investigation required extensive security reviews and protective measures that affected all personnel who had been involved in operations under Colonel Webb's command authority. My cooperation with the federal investigation required relocation to secure facilities where I could provide detailed testimony and technical analysis without risk of interference or retaliation from the corruption network or their foreign associates. The protective custody arrangement provided comprehensive security while allowing continued participation in the investigation and legal proceedings. The secure facility provided access to advanced technical equipment that allowed me to conduct detailed forensic analysis of the evidence while maintaining appropriate security protocols and classification requirements. The technical analysis revealed additional evidence of security breaches and intelligence compromise that had not been apparent from initial document review. The forensic investigation identified specific instances where classified operational information had been transmitted to unauthorized recipients through compromised communication systems that had been manipulated by the corruption network. The intelligence compromise included personnel identities, operational plans, and technical capabilities that could endanger ongoing operations and future personnel assignments. The scope of the intelligence compromise required immediate notification of all personnel who had served under Colonel Webb's command to assess their security status and implement protective measures where necessary. The notification process revealed that several former Ghost Unit members had experienced suspicious contact attempts and potential surveillance activities that suggested ongoing security threats from hostile intelligence services. Major Thompson was located at Fort Benning, where he had been serving in the training command position that had been intended to isolate him from operational activities. His debriefing revealed that he had continued gathering evidence about Operation Nightfall irregularities and had been preparing his own complaints about the intelligence manipulation when he learned about my federal investigation through official notification channels. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and Technical Sergeant Park were contacted through secure communication channels and provided protective briefings about the security compromise and potential threats to their safety. Both confirmed that they had experienced unusual contact attempts and surveillance activities that were now understood to be related to foreign intelligence efforts to assess their knowledge about compromised operations. The reunion with my former Ghost Unit teammates through the federal investigation provided emotional validation and professional support that had been absent during months of isolation and retaliation. Their experiences with administrative punishment and transfer had been similar to mine, confirming that the corruption network had systematically targeted personnel who possessed inconvenient knowledge about their criminal activities. Major Thompson's documentation of continued intelligence irregularities provided additional evidence that the corruption had continued after Operation Nightfall and that other missions had been compromised through similar intelligence manipulation techniques. His analysis supported my technical findings while providing command perspective on the operational impact of the fraudulent activities. The combined testimony from the Ghost Unit team provided compelling evidence of systematic intelligence fraud that had endangered multiple operations and compromised national security for financial gain. The comprehensive nature of the evidence and witness testimony created an overwhelming case for criminal prosecution and substantial civil penalties against the corruption network. The federal investigation expanded to include defense contractors and civilian personnel who had been complicit in the fraud activities, resulting in coordinated arrests and search warrants that were executed simultaneously across multiple locations to prevent evidence destruction and witness intimidation. The scale of the operation demonstrated the extensive resources being devoted to ensuring complete accountability for the corruption network. Colonel Webb's arrest occurred during a dramatic early morning operation at his base quarters that was coordinated with simultaneous arrests of his associates and seizure of evidence from multiple locations including defense contractor facilities and civilian residences. The comprehensive nature of the operation prevented any opportunity for evidence destruction or witness intimidation by remaining network members. The arrest warrants included charges of conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and violations of national security laws that carried potential sentences of decades in federal prison. The serious nature of the charges reflected the extensive criminal activity that had been documented through the investigation and the national security implications of the intelligence compromise and operational interference. The media coverage of the arrests created widespread awareness of the corruption case and prompted additional witnesses to come forward with information about related misconduct and security violations. The public attention provided additional protection for cooperating witnesses while creating pressure for comprehensive accountability and systemic reforms to prevent similar corruption in the future. My testimony before congressional oversight committees provided detailed technical analysis of the intelligence manipulation techniques and security breaches that had enabled the corruption network to operate undetected for extended periods. The testimony contributed to legislative reforms and oversight improvements designed to prevent similar systematic fraud and security compromise. The congressional testimony also provided public vindication for my decision to challenge the corruption through legal channels despite the significant personal and professional costs involved. The recognition that my actions had protected national security and exposed systematic criminal activity provided satisfaction and validation for the sacrifices that had been necessary to pursue justice. The legal proceedings continued for months as the complex evidence was presented and analyzed through federal court processes that required extensive testimony and technical analysis. The comprehensive nature of the case created significant media attention and public interest in military corruption and the importance of whistleblower protections for personnel who expose misconduct. Attorney Harrison's representation throughout the legal proceedings ensured that my interests were protected while supporting the broader investigation and prosecution efforts. His expertise in military whistleblower cases proved invaluable for navigating the complex legal requirements and maximizing both criminal accountability and civil recovery through the various legal mechanisms available. The False Claims Act settlement resulted in substantial monetary recovery for the government and significant financial awards for the whistleblowers who had provided evidence and testimony supporting the prosecution. The financial recognition provided compensation for the career damage and personal costs associated with challenging the corruption network through legal channels. However, the most significant outcome was the comprehensive reform of intelligence oversight and security procedures that resulted from the investigation findings and congressional recommendations. The systemic changes addressed the vulnerabilities that had enabled the corruption while providing enhanced protections for personnel who report misconduct and security violations. The restoration of my security clearance and offer of assignment to a prestigious intelligence position provided professional vindication and the opportunity to continue my military career in meaningful work that utilized my capabilities and experience. The assignment offered advancement opportunities that exceeded my original career objectives while providing the chance to contribute to implementing the reforms that had resulted from the investigation. The new assignment included responsibility for developing improved security protocols and oversight procedures that would prevent future corruption and protect against foreign intelligence exploitation of administrative vulnerabilities. The work provided direct application of the lessons learned through my investigation while contributing to national security improvements that extended far beyond individual accountability. The professional relationships that had been damaged by the retaliation and isolation were gradually restored as the truth about the corruption became known and my role in exposing the misconduct was recognized. The vindication provided personal satisfaction while demonstrating the importance of maintaining integrity and pursuing justice despite significant personal costs and professional risks. The experience had taught valuable lessons about resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of legal protections for personnel who challenge misconduct and corruption. The knowledge gained through the investigation and legal proceedings provided expertise that would be valuable throughout my career regardless of specific assignments or responsibilities. The reunion with Attorney Harrison during the settlement proceedings revealed that our professional relationship had developed into genuine friendship based on shared commitment to justice and legal accountability. His support throughout the investigation had been essential for achieving successful outcomes while protecting my interests and ensuring appropriate legal representation. The relationship with Attorney Harrison had evolved beyond professional consultation toward personal connection that was based on mutual respect and compatible values regarding integrity and justice. The shared experience of challenging powerful corruption networks had created bonds that extended beyond legal representation to include genuine friendship and potential for continued relationship development. The invitation to speak at legal conferences and military training programs about corruption investigation and whistleblower protections provided opportunities to share lessons learned while contributing to education and reform efforts that could prevent similar misconduct in the future. The speaking opportunities also provided professional recognition and expanded networking that could benefit future career development. The conclusion of the legal proceedings marked the end of a transformative period that had changed my understanding of military service, legal accountability, and personal integrity. The experience had been difficult and costly but ultimately rewarding through the achievement of justice and the implementation of reforms that would protect future personnel and national security interests. The future held promise for continued meaningful service and professional advancement while maintaining the values and principles that had motivated my decision to challenge corruption despite the personal and professional risks involved. The vindication provided confidence that integrity and persistence could overcome powerful opposition when supported by legal protections and professional expertise. The moment I had been preparing for arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning when I received orders to report to the Pentagon for a classified briefing with senior Defense Department officials. My new assignment as Director of Intelligence Security Oversight represented the culmination of 18 months of legal battles and professional vindication that had transformed my career trajectory beyond anything I had originally imagined possible. The flight to Washington provided time for reflection on the remarkable journey from motor pool administrative duties to one of the most sensitive positions within military intelligence oversight. The irony was profound that the corruption network's attempt to silence me through career destruction had ultimately led to advancement opportunities that exceeded my highest aspirations while contributing to systematic reforms that would protect future personnel. Attorney Harrison accompanied me to Washington for the final settlement conference that would conclude our legal relationship while formalizing the transition to my new professional responsibilities. Our personal relationship had deepened throughout the investigation period, evolving from professional consultation to genuine partnership based on shared values and mutual respect that extended far beyond legal representation. The Pentagon briefing included senior officials from multiple intelligence agencies who provided comprehensive orientation about my new responsibilities for developing and implementing security protocols designed to prevent future corruption and protect whistleblower personnel who report misconduct. The position represented direct application of lessons learned through my investigation while providing authority to create systematic improvements. The briefing also revealed that my investigation had contributed to identifying and dismantling corruption networks in other commands and geographical regions, demonstrating that the principles and techniques I had developed were applicable to broader security challenges throughout the military and intelligence communities. The expanded impact provided validation for the personal costs and professional risks involved in challenging the original corruption. The most satisfying aspect of the new assignment was the opportunity to work directly with personnel who were facing retaliation for reporting misconduct, providing the support and advocacy that I had needed during my own struggles with administrative punishment and professional isolation. The position allowed me to transform personal experience into systematic protection for others who demonstrated courage in challenging corruption and security violations. The security clearance restoration process had been expedited through recognition of my contributions to national security and the comprehensive investigation that had vindicated my original concerns about intelligence manipulation and operational security. The advanced clearance level provided access to classified programs and oversight responsibilities that utilized my technical expertise while demonstrating official acknowledgement of my competence and integrity. The financial settlement from the False Claims Act litigation provided economic security that allowed me to focus entirely on professional responsibilities without concern about career stability or retirement planning. The monetary recognition was substantial but less important than the professional vindication and opportunity to contribute meaningfully to preventing future corruption and protecting national security interests. Attorney Harrison's proposal during our final dinner in Washington created the personal culmination of our relationship development alongside the professional achievements we had accomplished together. His offer of marriage reflected genuine commitment based on shared experiences and compatible values rather than convenience or professional convenience, providing foundation for authentic partnership that could support both our career objectives. The wedding planning occurred during the transition period while I was establishing myself in the new Pentagon position and developing relationships with personnel who would be essential for implementing the security reforms and oversight improvements that had emerged from congressional recommendations and Department of Defense policy changes resulting from my investigation. The ceremony itself was attended by former Ghost Unit teammates, federal investigators, and legal colleagues who had supported the investigation and provided testimony that contributed to successful prosecution of the corruption network. The gathering represented celebration of both personal happiness and professional justice that had emerged from the challenging period of legal confrontation and career uncertainty. Major Thompson served as honor guard, having been promoted and reassigned to important training responsibilities that utilized his leadership experience and operational expertise. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and Technical Sergeant Park participated in the ceremony while pursuing advanced education and career development opportunities that had become available through recognition of their contributions to exposing the corruption network. The honeymoon provided time for reflection and future planning while Attorney Harrison and I discussed how our respective careers could be coordinated to maximize our individual contributions while supporting shared objectives regarding legal accountability and corruption prevention.
The conversation revealed compatible long-term goals that could be pursued through collaborative approaches to our professional responsibilities. The return to Pentagon duties included intensive preparation for congressional testimony,
about implementation of security reforms and oversight improvements that had been recommended through the investigation findings. The testimony provided opportunity to demonstrate progress while identifying additional areas where systematic improvements could enhance security and accountability throughout military and intelligence operations. The congressional appearance was broadcast on national television, providing public recognition of the transformation from motor pool administrative duties to senior Pentagon oversight responsibilities, while highlighting the importance of whistleblower protections and legal accountability for corruption and misconduct. The visibility contributed to my professional reputation while supporting broader advocacy for personnel who challenge misconduct. The most dramatic moment occurred during the question period when Congressman Robert Martinez asked directly about my motivation for pursuing the investigation despite significant personal and professional costs. My response emphasized duty, integrity, and commitment to national security that transcended individual career considerations while acknowledging the importance of legal protections and professional support for personnel who report misconduct. The answer included specific reference to the Ghost Unit training and oath of service that had prepared me to prioritize mission accomplishment and personnel welfare over personal convenience or career advancement. The testimony provided clear articulation of military values and professional responsibility that resonated with both congressional representatives and public audiences who were following the proceedings. The congressional testimony was followed by meetings with senior Pentagon officials who were implementing the systematic reforms and oversight improvements that had emerged from the investigation recommendations. The meetings provided opportunity to contribute directly to policy development while ensuring that practical implementation considerations were addressed through input from personnel who had experienced both corruption and the legal processes necessary for accountability. The new oversight responsibilities included regular briefings to senior leadership about security vulnerabilities and corruption risks that could affect operational effectiveness and national security. The briefings utilized my technical expertise and investigation experience while providing early warning systems that could prevent future misconduct through proactive identification and intervention rather than reactive investigation and prosecution. The position also included liaison responsibilities with federal law enforcement agencies and congressional oversight committees that were maintaining ongoing supervision of reform implementation and corruption prevention efforts. The coordination provided comprehensive approach to accountability while ensuring that lessons learned were systematically applied throughout government operations and contractor relationships. 6 months after assuming the Pentagon position, I received an unusual assignment to conduct security assessment at Fort Richardson, where my investigation had originated and Colonel Webb's corruption network had operated. The return to Alaska represented full-circle completion of the journey while providing opportunity to observe implementation of reforms and improvements at the location where the original misconduct had occurred. The security assessment revealed comprehensive changes in personnel, procedures, and oversight systems that had eliminated the vulnerabilities that enabled the corruption network to operate undetected for extended periods. The improvements included enhanced audit procedures, upgraded communication security, and expanded whistleblower protections that addressed all the systemic weaknesses that had been identified through the investigation. The most satisfying discovery was that the motor pool administrative section had been completely reorganized with new leadership and improved procedures that prevented the kind of retaliation and administrative manipulation that had been used against me during the investigation period. The changes provided concrete evidence that the systematic reforms were being implemented effectively while protecting future personnel from similar misconduct. During the security assessment, I was requested to meet with the new base commander, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, who had been assigned to restore integrity and effectiveness to operations that had been compromised by the corruption network. The meeting provided opportunity to share lessons learned while contributing to continued improvement efforts and accountability measures. Colonel Mitchell's approach to command emphasized transparency, accountability, and merit-based evaluation that contrasted sharply with the culture that had enabled corruption and retaliation under the previous leadership. Her commitment to implementing reforms and supporting personnel who reported misconduct demonstrated that systematic change was possible through dedicated leadership and institutional support. The conversation with Colonel Mitchell included discussion of my career development and future assignment possibilities that could utilize my experience and expertise while providing continued advancement opportunities within the reformed military structure. The discussion revealed multiple options for meaningful service that would contribute to national security while supporting personal and professional fulfillment. The final day of the security assessment included visit to the conference room where I had originally been briefed about Operation Nightfall and where the intelligence manipulation had begun that ultimately led to exposing the entire corruption network. The room had been renovated and equipped with enhanced security systems that would prevent future document manipulation and unauthorized access to classified information. Standing in that conference room provided profound reflection on the transformation that had occurred through persistence, legal courage, and commitment to accountability despite significant personal costs and professional risks. The journey from administrative punishment to senior Pentagon oversight represented vindication not only for my individual case but for all personnel who challenge corruption and misconduct through appropriate legal channels. The return flight to Washington was accompanied by Attorney Harrison, who had conducted his own business in Alaska while supporting my security assessment mission. Our conversation during the flight addressed future plans for both personal and professional development while considering how our respective careers could continue supporting shared objectives regarding accountability and justice. The conversation included discussion of potential family planning and long-term residence decisions that reflected our commitment to building authentic partnership while maintaining individual professional identities and career advancement opportunities. The balance between personal fulfillment and professional contribution represented a sustainable approach to marriage and career that honored both dimensions of our lives. The conclusion of the Alaska assignment provided closure for the investigation period while opening possibilities for continued meaningful service and advancement within the reformed military structure. The experience had demonstrated that integrity and persistence could overcome powerful opposition when supported by legal protections and professional advocacy, providing confidence for continued challenges and opportunities throughout my career. The future held promise for continued contribution to national security and personnel protection while building authentic personal partnership with someone who shared my values and commitment to justice. The transformation from retaliation victim to senior oversight official represented hope for all personnel who face misconduct and corruption, demonstrating that legal accountability and professional vindication were possible through courage and persistence. The summons arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by courier to my Pentagon office with instructions to report immediately to Fort Richardson for an urgent security matter involving classified personnel and potential intelligence compromise. The classified nature of the assignment prevented detailed briefing, but the priority level suggested serious implications requiring my immediate attention and expertise. Attorney Harrison understood the significance of the emergency deployment, having observed similar situations during our marriage where critical security issues demanded immediate response regardless of personal plans or scheduling conflicts. His support for my professional responsibilities reflected the partnership we had built around shared commitment to service and accountability despite the demands and uncertainties inherent in our respective careers. The flight to Alaska provided time for strategic preparation and consideration of potential scenarios that could require my intervention as Director of Intelligence Security Oversight. The assignment parameters suggested involvement of former Ghost Unit personnel or operations, creating both professional interest and personal concern about colleagues who might be facing security challenges or misconduct allegations. The arrival at Fort Richardson revealed dramatic changes in both personnel and facilities since my security assessment 6 months earlier. The base buzzed with activity suggesting major operational developments, while the enhanced security presence indicated serious concerns about intelligence compromise or personnel threats that required immediate attention and resolution. Colonel Sarah Mitchell greeted me personally upon arrival, an unusual protocol that confirmed the exceptional nature of the situation requiring my involvement. Her demeanor suggested urgency combined with relief that specialized expertise was available to address complex security challenges that exceeded normal base capabilities and required Pentagon-level oversight and intervention. The briefing session included senior personnel from multiple agencies who had been investigating suspicious activities involving former Ghost Unit members and potential foreign intelligence contact attempts. The investigation had identified systematic efforts to recruit or compromise personnel who possessed knowledge about classified operations and security procedures that could be valuable to hostile intelligence services. The most concerning development was the arrest of an individual claiming to be a former Ghost Unit operative who had been attempting to access classified facilities using credentials and identification that appeared authentic but contained subtle irregularities suggesting sophisticated forgery and identity manipulation. The security breach attempt had triggered comprehensive investigation revealing broader patterns of attempted infiltration and intelligence gathering. The arrested individual had been detained in a secure facility pending identification, verification, and counterintelligence assessment to determine whether he represented legitimate personnel with security concerns or hostile intelligence operative attempting to exploit Ghost Unit connections for unauthorized access to classified information and operational capabilities. The identification challenge was complicated by the compartmentalized nature of Ghost Unit operations and the limited number of personnel who possessed comprehensive knowledge about unit membership and operational assignments. The verification process required specialized expertise and access to highly classified personnel records that were maintained under exceptional security protocols. My involvement was essential because my position as Director of Intelligence Security Oversight provided both the security clearance and operational knowledge necessary to verify the individual's identity and assess the security implications of his detention and the broader infiltration attempts that had been detected through ongoing counterintelligence operations. The interrogation facility was located in a secure section of the base that had been completely renovated since my previous assignment there. The enhanced security measures and specialized equipment reflected lessons learned from the corruption investigation and implementation of improved protocols designed to prevent unauthorized access and document manipulation. The detained individual was being held in isolation pending identification verification with limited contact allowed only with personnel who possessed appropriate clearances and operational need to know. The security protocols reflected serious concerns about potential compromise and the possibility that foreign intelligence services were attempting to exploit Ghost Unit connections for strategic advantage. The initial assessment meeting included review of the credentials and documentation that the individual had presented during his attempted facility access. The materials appeared authentic at first examination but contained metadata irregularities and security features that suggested sophisticated forgery capabilities potentially available only to state-sponsored intelligence operations. The most troubling aspect of the attempted breach was the accuracy of the operational knowledge that the individual had demonstrated during initial questioning. His information about Ghost Unit procedures and personnel suggested either authentic insider knowledge or comprehensive intelligence preparation that indicated serious security compromise requiring immediate investigation and countermeasures. The decision to conduct direct interrogation represented both professional necessity and personal interest in determining whether the individual was indeed a former colleague facing security concerns or foreign operative attempting to exploit my position and relationships for intelligence gathering purposes. The meeting would require careful assessment of verbal and behavioral indicators while maintaining appropriate security protocols. The interrogation room was equipped with advanced recording and monitoring equipment that would document all interactions while providing security personnel with comprehensive assessment capabilities. The setting was designed to be both secure and intimidating, reflecting the serious nature of the potential security breach and the consequences for personnel involved in unauthorized intelligence activities. The individual was brought into the interrogation room under escort by security personnel who maintained appropriate distance while ensuring immediate response capability if the situation required intervention. His appearance and demeanor suggested military background and operational experience, but definitive identification required detailed questioning and assessment of specific knowledge that only authentic Ghost Unit personnel would possess. The moment of truth arrived when I asked him directly to identify himself and explain his presence at the facility. His response was immediate and confident as he reached slowly into his pocket, maintaining eye contact while clearly indicating his intention to retrieve identification materials under the watchful supervision of security personnel. The black badge he produced was unmistakably authentic Ghost Unit identification that I recognized immediately from my own operational experience. The special polymer construction, holographic security features, and classified markings were genuine and virtually impossible to replicate without access to highly classified manufacturing processes and materials available only to authorized government facilities. However, the badge belonged to Sergeant Michael Torres, a Ghost Unit operative who had been declared killed in action during a classified mission 8 months earlier. The appearance of his identification in the possession of someone claiming to be a current operative created immediate questions about mission reporting accuracy and potential cover-up of operational failures or personnel abandonment. The individual claiming to be Sergeant Torres provided detailed knowledge about Ghost Unit operations and personnel that could only have been acquired through authentic service experience. His information about training procedures, operational protocols, and personnel relationships was accurate and comprehensive, suggesting genuine insider knowledge rather than intelligence preparation or briefing materials. The verification process required immediate contact with classified personnel records and operational reporting systems to confirm the status of Sergeant Torres and investigate discrepancies between official casualty reports and his apparent survival and continued operational activity. The investigation revealed systematic inconsistencies in mission reporting that suggested possible cover-up or operational deception. The resolution of the identification crisis required comprehensive review of the classified mission where Sergeant Torres had allegedly been killed in action. The investigation revealed that the casualty report had been fabricated to conceal a failed extraction operation that had left him behind enemy lines without support or communication capability for extended periods. The cover-up of the failed extraction had been orchestrated by some of the same personnel who had been involved in Colonel Webb's corruption network, suggesting that operational misconduct had extended beyond financial fraud to include abandonment of personnel and falsification of casualty reports to avoid accountability for mission failures and command negligence. Sergeant Torres had survived behind enemy lines for months through exceptional survival skills and strategic thinking while attempting to make contact with friendly forces and arrange extraction from hostile territory. His eventual return represented remarkable resilience and determination rather than security compromise or hostile intelligence manipulation. The reunion with Sergeant Torres provided emotional validation while revealing additional evidence of systematic misconduct that had extended beyond the corruption network I had originally exposed. The falsified casualty reports and abandoned personnel represented serious violations of military ethics and legal obligations that required immediate investigation and accountability measures. The debrief sessions with Sergeant Torres revealed comprehensive intelligence about enemy capabilities and operational activities that he had observed during his extended survival period. His information provided valuable strategic intelligence while demonstrating that his survival and return represented significant operational advantage rather than security compromise. The final confrontation occurred when I was asked to brief Colonel Mitchell about the resolution of the security incident and the implications for ongoing operations and personnel policies. The briefing provided opportunity to present the authentic Ghost Unit badge that had resolved the identification crisis while explaining the broader patterns of misconduct that had been revealed through the investigation. The presentation of the badge to Colonel Mitchell represented symbolic conclusion of my journey from administrative punishment to senior oversight authority while demonstrating that authentic credentials and legitimate authority had ultimately triumphed over corruption and deception. The moment provided personal satisfaction while contributing to continued accountability and reform efforts. The successful resolution of the security incident and recovery of abandoned personnel represented vindication of the oversight systems and accountability measures that had been implemented. Through my investigation and the broader reform efforts that had emerged from congressional recommendations and departmental policy changes, the return to Washington was accompanied by Sergeant Torres, who would receive comprehensive medical evaluation and debriefing while being considered for advanced assignments that could utilize his exceptional survival experience and operational knowledge. His recovery represented hope for other personnel who might have been abandoned or misrepresented through falsified operational reporting. The conclusion of the assignment provided final closure for the investigation period while opening possibilities for continued meaningful service within the reformed military structure. The experience had demonstrated that accountability and justice were possible through persistent effort and appropriate legal protections, providing confidence for addressing future challenges and opportunities. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.